On a sunny afternoon in May 1993, two 8-year-old boys were riding bikes in their neighborhood after school. Later that afternoon, a third 8-year-old boy would join them. By dinner time, their parents couldn't locate the boys. They drove around the neighborhood asking if anyone had seen them. The boys had been seen going into an area of woods known as Robin Hood Hills. Their parents were worried. One even asked a patrol officer for help to look for his son. The officer reassured the concerned father that his son was just out playing and probably forgot the time. But when the streetlights came on and the boys were still missing, their parents knew something wasn't right. Steve Branch, Christopher Byers, and Michael Moore were reported missing by their parents the evening of May 5th. By late afternoon the next day, their bodies were being pulled from a drainage ditch in the woods behind the Blue Beacon truck wash, less than half a mile from their homes. Almost exactly 1 month later, in June 1993, the West Memphis Police Department held a press conference announcing the arrest of 3 local teens.
Scale of 1 to 10, how solid do you think the case is?
11.
Jesse Lloyd Miskelly. Jesse Miskelly is 17 years of age. Charles Jason Baldwin. He is 16 years of age. Michael Wayne Eccles. Mr. Eccles is 18 years of age.
Damien, did you do it?
You got a fry, Damien.
How you feeling now,
Did you
Damien?
do it, Damien? Let a fry, Damien. What's the call?
You think, Jason?
Got a fry. We think you're innocent. See you in hell, Damien.
We know you're innocent, Jason.
The next year, Jason Baldwin, Damian Eccles, and Jesse Miskelly Jr. went to trial for the murders. Joe Berlinger and Bruce Sinofsky, a pair of documentary filmmakers, arrived in West Memphis to document the trials. Their documentary, titled Paradise Lost: The Child Murders at Robin Hood Hills, premiered June 10, 1996, on HBO. Jesse was tried first.
Guilty of first-degree murder in the death of Michael Moore. Guilty of second-degree murder in the death of Stevie Branch. Guilty of second-degree murder in the death of Chris Byers. That is, you will receive a life sentence plus 40 years.
Jason and Damian were tried together.
We, the jury, find Damian Eccles guilty of capital murder in the death of Stevie Branch, guilty of capital murder in the death of Chris Byers, guilty of capital murder in the death of Michael Moore. We, the jury, find Jason Baldwin guilty of capital murder in the death of Chris Byers, guilty of capital murder in the death of Stevie Branch, guilty of capital murder in the death of Michael Moore.
It's been 32 years since it all happened. Books have been written by those involved. A movie has been made. Still, what happened on May 5th, 1993 is shrouded in controversy. It's been the subject of much debate online, beginning when the internet was still in its infancy and dial-up was a thing. In this series, I'll take you back through the original investigation, the trials, the appeals, and the aftermath. The boys were in 2nd grade at Weaver Elementary School, which is in walking distance from the neighborhood they lived in at the time. None of the families live there anymore. Since the murders, one by one, they all moved away. But in 1993, the Byers family, John Mark, Melissa, Ryan, and Christopher, lived at 1400 East Barton. Ryan Clark is Melissa's oldest son from a previous relationship. Christopher was born June 23, 1984. At the time, Melissa was married to Christopher's biological father, Ricky Murray. However, the couple divorced when Chris was 4 years old. Melissa then met and married John Mark Byers in 1988. Mark adopted Chris, and his name became Christopher Mark Byers. The Moore family, Todd, Dana, Dawn, and Michael, lived at 1398 East Barton. James Michael Moore was born July 27, 1984. While the Moores and the Byers were neighbors, they weren't always friends. The Byers, who had a pool, would often host parties. According to Mark, Todd and Dana would get to be a little too much when drinking at these parties, so they stopped inviting them. Michael and Chris were friends and played together, although at one point they weren't allowed to play together after getting in trouble. The Hobbs family, Terry, Pam, Steve, and Amanda, lived at 1600 East Macaulay. Stephen Edward Branch was born November 26, 1984. At the time, Pam was married to Steve Branch Sr. The couple divorced when Steve was an infant. Newly separated Pam moved back to Blytheville, Arkansas from Austin, Texas to live with her parents. She would meet and later marry Terry Hobbs. In the book Box Full of Nightmares, which comes from Terry's personal memoirs, Terry describes how they met. It was at the Blytheville restaurant I was running for my dad when I met Pam, my second wife, and her son Stevie. Pam's younger sister Paula worked in the restaurant as a waitress. Her parents were regulars and often came in to eat, and I became acquainted with them and several of their other children. One day, Paula's father, Jackie Hicks, came and asked if he could borrow money in order to pick up his daughter and grandson in Texas. As he continued talking, I learned that his daughter Pam was in Austin, Texas with her first husband and Stevie, her son. He told me that things weren't working out and Pam wanted to leave Texas and come home. I decided to loan Jackie the money to bring his daughter home. Crossroads in life are not clearly marked. That day, I chose the plainly marked path. Days, maybe weeks later, Paula asked if Pam could also work at the restaurant to help her get on her feet and start acting like herself again. After some discussion and indecision, I decided to give her a chance. The first time I met Pam, I noticed that she was cute, tiny with dark blonde hair. That's not what stood out to me though. I noticed that her eyes looked haunted with pain at such a young age. She was lacking in confidence, struggling emotionally. My heart went out to her while we discussed her ability to work in the restaurant. The first day or two, Pam only managed to work a couple of hours. She wasn't quite ready to face the world yet. Eventually, she pulled herself together and started working full-time. The two of us talked about our lives and eventually became friends while she learned to trust herself and take care of her son. During this transition, she divorced her first husband and we started dating. As Pam grew stronger and more confident, we thought about getting married. We were both hesitant about jumping into marriage after her recent ordeal, but it wasn't long before we went to the Justice of the Peace and got married. On August 25th, 1986, Pam, Stevie, and I became a family. The couple then had a daughter, Amanda, born in 1989. And so it went for the boys and their families. Work, school, holidays, and birthdays. The day-to-day called life. Even that Wednesday began no differently than every other day. Everyone went to work and school. Pam and Amanda left a friend's house they'd been visiting earlier in the day to walk to Weaver to pick up Steve. It was hot that afternoon, which made Amanda cranky. So when they arrived at 2:45, Pam decided to check Stevie out of school early rather than wait for 3 o'clock. Besides, she still had to get home and fix dinner before going to work at Catfish Island, where she waited tables. But not tonight. Tonight, Pam, who had been training to become a manager, would work her first night as the closing manager. Amanda was getting irritable, so I went in and checked Steve out of school, and then we walked home. And the whole time walking home, Steve was telling me, "I love you, Mama," the whole time. We get home, I'm gonna say around 3 o'clock from the walk from school to where I live. And the first thing he did, he was keeping his bike in the house. His granddaddy had just bought him a new bike because his bike had gotten stolen. So he was keeping his bike in the house. First thing he did was went to his room to get his bike. Well, one of the rules before Stevie, could watch cartoons or whatever he needed to do his homework first. I say, "Son, what do you think you're doing? Don't you have homework?" He said, "Mama, my homework is already done." He showed it to me. I seen that his homework was done, and I hung it on the refrigerator. And he goes out to the carport. He was just, gonna ride around in the yard. And I'm gonna say about 3:15, Michael Moore came to the house on his bike. And he asked me if Steve could go riding bikes with him. And I told him, I said, "No, not today. I gotta get ready for work." And it was getting close to time for me to get ready for work because I had to be to work at 5. And plus, I always cooked their meals and things like that before I went to work. And I said, "I'm cooking and all this," and Steve and Michael both kept begging, "Please, please, please, please," and parents do tend to give in to our children sometimes. So I told him, I said, "Okay, Stevie, you can go." I said, "But son, if you're not home by 4:30, I'm gonna ground you 2 weeks from that bike." And Steve said, "Mama, I'll be home, I promise, at 4:30. When they go to leave, Michael Moore lifted up his little arms, and I thought he had on a watch. Again, I guess later found out it was a compass or something that he found, but I thought it was a watch. He said, "My mom is not home, but she'll be home in 5 minutes, I promise you." So Stevie and Michael leaves just as happy as two little boys can get. John Mark Byers, who had been at a clinic in Memphis from 9 a.m. to 2:45 p.m., arrived home at about 3:10 that afternoon. Chris, who Mark didn't feel was responsible enough to have a house key, was not waiting for him under the carport when he arrived. Byers had instructed Chris that if he wasn't home when Chris got out of school, he was to wait under the carport for his brother Ryan, who did have a key, to get home from school and let him in. Ryan typically got home around 3:20. Mark said he looked around the yard and yelled for Chris, but didn't see him. When Ryan arrived home from school at 3:30 or 3:35, Chris still wasn't home. Ryan, who was a witness to a traffic accident, was due in court at 4 p.m. Mark and Ryan waited until 3:50 before Mark decided they had to leave so Ryan wouldn't be late. Mark says he left the back door unlocked for Chris, and he and Ryan headed to the courthouse. During the original investigation, Chris Byers' whereabouts were unknown beginning right after school until about 5 p.m. In 2007, Pam Hobbs revealed something that had previously been left out during the interviews with the parents. They were gone, I'm gonna say maybe 10 minutes, and Christopher Byers comes to my house, and he was asking for Steve and Michael, and I said, "Chris, I'm surprised you didn't run into them because they just left." Well, the Muppet Babies were on, and Christopher asked me, he said, "Do you care if I sit here and watch Muppet Babies with Amanda?" I said, "Nah, that'll be fine." So the Muppet Babies went off around 4 o'clock. I think it came on around 3:30 and goes off at 4 o'clock. And when the Muppet Babies went off, Christopher left. All of the parents were interviewed after the boys' bodies were found. However, there are only notes from the detectives included in the case file. The only parent whose interview was recorded was John Mark Byers. Pam testified at both trials, but she neither divulged nor was she asked about Chris Byers coming over to their house that afternoon. I believe if Pam had told anyone back in 1993 that Chris had come over that day, it would have been in the case file. At about 4:25, Pam goes out to the carport to retrieve her uniform from the dryer. Right about that time, her husband Terry pulls into the driveway. Terry asks Pam, "Where's Frog Legs?" Frog Legs is a nickname Terry had given Steve. Pam tells him he's at Michael Moore's house and should be home any minute. She tells Terry she'd told Steve he had to be home at 4:30. At around 4:45, Steve still wasn't home. Pam suggests that Terry go ahead and take her to work, and on the way stop by the Moores to pick up Steve. Terry, Pam, and Amanda do just that. The Moores' home on East Spartan is about a block from the Hobbs house on Macaulay. However, according to Pam, when they arrive at the Moores' house, Michael, Steve, and Chris are nowhere in sight. Convinced that Steve has just lost track of time, Terry drops Pam off at Catfish Island to begin her shift at 5 p.m. Mark Byers leaves the courthouse at around 4:50 to pick Melissa up from work. When they arrive home, Mark and Melissa notice that one of their lawn chairs has been pushed under the window facing the carport.
I got home, I was in the Monroe Clinic from 9 o'clock to about 2:45 having more tests made over meetings. I got home and it was 10 after 3. Well, Christopher's instructions were, if I am not at home when you get home, wait right under the carport till 20 after 3. Your brother Ryan will be here. He'll unlock the door and let you in. Because he wasn't old enough for me to have a house key. So I let Ryan, who's almost 14, have a house key. And just at times I'd go to the post office or grocery store or maybe pick up a part, and I wouldn't get home right at 3 o'clock. And this particular time, I knew I was at the hospital, but I got home at 10 after 3. He wasn't, and he wasn't there. He wasn't in the yard. I hollered. I didn't see him. I waited. Ryan got home at like 3:30, 3:35. He had to be at court down here at 4 o'clock, and we waited till like 10 till 4. And I said, well, come on. I got to take you to court. I'll leave, the door unlocked. Christopher get in when he gets home. I took Ryan to court, and then at like 10 minutes till 5, I said, I got to go pick your mom up. Chad Bell and his mother was there. I said, if you get out of court, before I get back, let Chad Bell and his mom give you a ride home. I said, when I get home, if you're not there, I said, if you get out of court before, I get home, don't go off playing somewhere because I'll be coming down to the courthouse to get you. Stay home if you get out of court before I get there. Well, we came home. We had noticed that Christopher had been back to the house because I thought I'd left the door unlocked, and I hadn't left. I didn't leave the door unlocked. It was locked. But the carport window right there, he knew you could push it up because it doesn't lock good. So he had gotten one of the lawn chairs, pushed it over in front of the window, and he had tried to push the window in, but we got a microwave cart right inside the window there, and there's flowers and stuff sitting on it. And he realized that he couldn't get the window up enough by himself to crawl in the window, so he took off. Well, this is like 5:20 that I just got home with my wife. I thought, well, I'm going to go get Ryan. Well, I backed out of the driveway, headed up 14th towards Broadway, and I had got maybe 4 or 5 houses, down 14th, headed to Broadway, and maybe from here to the curb, this is the street and that's the curb. Right about here, out in the street, is Christopher laying on his stomach, doing his hands like this on the skateboard heading to Broadway. I pulled up behind him in the car. He didn't even hear me. I honked the horn. He turned around. He saw it was dead. And I took back 1,000,000 times for spanking him. When I took him back home. But I took him back home, and in the car I said, son, what's the rules when you get out of school? Come home. I said, if I'm not here, what are you supposed to do? Wait on Ryan. I said, when Ryan comes in and lets you in, what are you supposed to do? Wait right here in the yard. I said, well, what were you doing on your skateboard in the middle of the street, laying down on it? Well, I was just skating, Dad. I said, well, son, you got a spanking coming. Yes, sir. So there at our bar, he held onto his bar. I gave him 2 or 3 licks. And I said, now I'm going to get Ryan. His mom was sitting up there in the kitchen. I said, now I'm going to get Ryan. You clean up the paper under the carport here. That's the rest of your punishment. As soon as I get back with Ryan, we're going to go eat supper. And I have, if I could have took whipping him back, I'd have done it 1,000,000 times, but I was just trying to keep him safe. Right. I was just trying, to keep from something like this happening.
Okay.
I just said 1,000,000 times, son, if you'd have just minded me this one time. If you'd have just minded me this one time.
On June 21st, 2007, Terry Hobbs goes to the West Memphis Police Department to give his first formal account of his activities May 5th and May 6th, 1993.
Going back to May the 5th, you said before, and correct me if I'm wrong, please, you said that you took Pam to work at Catfish Island. Who went with you when you took her? Amanda. Okay. And when you dropped Pam off at work, where did you and Amanda go from there?
On our way to take Pam to work. Well, after I got home, if you remember, Pam told me that when I asked where Steve was at, she said he was riding his bicycle with Michael Moore. So on our way to take her to work, we went by the Moore's house to see if Stevie was there or Mike was there. Mm-hmm. Don was there. And she told us that, they're riding their bicycles. So, me and Pam decided to take Pam to work, and I'd go back, and I had Amanda with me. We'd go back and try on them. And when we left Catfish Island, we went back by the Moore's house and just started going street to street in the neighborhood to see if we could find them.
You said you went back. Did you talk to Mr. and Mrs. Moore?
No, I don't think Don or Dana was home at the time. Don was. And we did talk to her. We was asking if Steve or Mike here when I took Pam to work. Okay. And when I come back, I didn't see any change, bicycles in the front yard, so we just drove around street to street in the neighborhood to see if we could see them.
You and Amanda. Okay. How long did you do that?
Probably 30 minutes. And then went maybe an hour. I don't know about the time exactly, but after we went back to see if we could find them in the neighborhood, me and Amanda, I took Amanda to, when we both went home, and I said, come on, we're gonna walk around the neighborhood and see if we can hear them behind them fences in somebody's yard, because I didn't know where George lived, which one of his old friends. But we was gonna see if we could just hear them playing behind them fences, the privacy fences. So we did that for a while, and we didn't see them. We went back to our house.
Just when exactly the boys were last seen is quite difficult to piece together. At 5:30 p.m., Mark Byers saw Chris cleaning the carport as he was leaving his house to pick Ryan up from the courthouse.
Where were you when you first found out the kids were missing?
When I found out that all three of them were missing,
Well, yours.
well, when I realized Christopher wasn't at home, it would have been around 6:30.
Okay.
And the reason for that time, I left the house at 5:30 to come get my oldest son, Ryan, who was here at the courthouse, testifying about a case that he had seen on a lady for reckless driving.
Okay.
And it was the day that the little gray-headed lady held court. I can't think of her name.
Miss Margaret.
Miss Margaret, that's it. Well, as soon as court was out, let me back up. When I left the house at 5:30, I left Christopher under the carport with instructions to pick up paper under the carport and clean up the carport. And just as soon as I got Ryan, we was going to come back and go eat supper. So I came up here and waited till the court case was over. And that was over. I got Ryan and we drove home. Well, we pulled up in the driveway and I didn't see him under the driveway, but I thought maybe, he was in the house. So I went in the house. And right inside our door, of course, there's the kitchen. My wife was on the phone talking to her boss. And I asked her, I said, where's Christopher? And she kind of did like this, just a minute. And then she got off the phone from talking with her boss and said, well, he's right outside. She said he's come in and out a time or two, wants to get, I think, a drink of water or a cookie. She said he's been in and out a couple times. He's just right outside. So I walked back out and hollered across the fence to the neighbors, because sometimes he goes next door and plays with the neighbors' kids. We didn't hear any answer. And then I told my son Ryan, I said, get on your skateboard, and go down and see if he's playing with the two little girls down the street. So he took off down there to check. Then when he came back, he said, no, they hadn't seen him.
In the case file, there are two reports, both authored by Detective Ridge, of Don Moore and Kim Williams. On this date, I interviewed Dawn Moore, who stated that she was out looking for her brother. She stated that she saw 3 boys, 1 white male and 2 black male, coming out of Robin Hood near the ditch that goes to Devil's Den. She stated that they were near the hydrant across the street, and as she drove by, one of them asked if she wanted a shot. She felt that they were talking about drugs. She stated that she didn't see the little boys that evening. Kim stated that she saw Steve and Michael between 5:30 and 6 p.m. going into Robin Hood, into the ditch that goes to the Devil's Den area. She saw their bikes parked by the road near Goodwin. Kim also saw 3 older boys coming out of Robin Hood near the dead end road off Goodwin, 1 white male and 2 black males. She never saw Christopher that day. Then there is the testimony from Dana Moore during the Eccles-Baldwin trial.
After school, when did you see Michael?
About 10 after 3.
Okay. And what time does school let out?
3 o'clock.
And where is the school in relation to your home?
Right next door.
And in the afternoon, did you see Michael occasionally in and out?
Yes, sir.
All right. Was he with anybody?
He was with Steve Branch.
Approximately what time did you last see Michael?
At 6 o'clock that evening.
And where did you last see him?
Going down 14th Street.
And who was he with?
Steve and Christopher.
And how were they going?
They were on bikes. Chris was riding with Steve and Michael was riding his bike.
Dang, if you would, if you take this orange marker and mark the area where you live, May need to look at it a minute to acquaint yourself with the street.
Right there.
Okay. And would you highlight your address?
Well, the address is wrong, Tom.
It's wrong.
It says 1390, it's supposed to be 98.
Okay, 1398, all right. Go ahead and mark it.
Okay.
But that is where it is, right there on the corner,
Yes, sir.
1398.
There you go.
Okay, and what street, or what streets is your house on the corner of?
East Martin, 14.
In 14th Street? All right, if you would take your, take the marker and highlight where it says Barton and highlight where you see 14.
Where it says Martin?
Uh-huh. Okay. And where did you, if you could step to the side, let me give you this pointer so the jurors can see. If you could point to the direction where you last saw Michael going.
Going down this way.
All right. And when you're pointing, are you referring to north of your house?
Yes.
According to Dana, after seeing the boys at 6, she sent her daughter Dawn to go after Michael and bring him home. The problem is that while Dawn and Kim did see Michael and Steve, they did not see Christopher. Is it possible that Dawn and Kim are talking about seeing the boys earlier than 5:30? In January 2018, on an episode of the podcast Truth and Justice with Bob Ruff, Dawn spoke about her recollection of events on May 5th. It is important to mention, in 1993, Dawn was 10 years old, and 2018 would be 25 years later. Also, in the years since her brother's murder, her relationship with her parents has not been a good one.
We went home, dropped our stuff off, and went playing. Well, I'm the one that gave him permission to go to Steve's. We usually didn't walk home together. I had the house key, and we would just meet at home because, you know, God forbid brother and sister be seen out in public together. But yes, I gave him permission to go to Steve's. And then I went to my friend Kim Williams' house. She lived on Wilson, one street over from 14th. Michael and Steve had shown up at Kim's house and asked if they could go into Robin Hood. And the rule was that we weren't supposed to, but we didn't know why. It was just no. And I didn't know anything about Robin Hood or anything. And you know, Michael told me that there were bike trails in there and that they had kind of like a clubhouse or something. And that's all they were going to do, you know, nagging me. And finally I said, yeah, don't tell Mom and Dad. As soon as they left, Kim started telling me, you know, kids go in there and do drugs and have sex and all this stuff. And so Kim and I went to go get them. And when we came up, right to the right of Devil's Den, there's a ditch right there. And we saw them going in right there where that ditch is. I guess it's a ditch. There was a little walkway kind of right there beside the house. And we saw them, just the back of them going into that and directly across the street where those boys were standing. Devil's Den, I think it's right there by 14th. And really all it is it's kind of like just a little bitty driveway. Because I knew that Michael was with Stevie. I didn't see him with Chris. I saw him with Steve. I saw him with Steve going into Robin Hood. I don't know, about 4 or 5 o'clock, something like that. I mean, it was after school. Yeah, we went back to Kim's for a little while. And then I went by the house and told Dana that they were in Robin Hood, that we needed to go get them. And that's another thing Dana never told anyone, is that I repeated over and over again, Michael is in Robin Hood.
Terry Hobbs says he was driving around looking for Steve after dropping Pam off at work.
Going back to May the 5th, you said before, and correct me if I'm wrong, okay, please, you said that you took Pam to work at Catfish Island. Okay, who went with you when you took her?
Amanda.
Okay. And when you dropped Pam off at work, where did you and Amanda go from there?
On our way to take Pam to work, Well, after I got home, if you remember, Pam told me that when I asked where Steve was at, she said he was riding his bicycle with Michael Moore. So on our way to take her to work, we went by the Moore's house to see if Stevie was there or Mike was there.
Mm-hmm.
Don was there. And she told us that, they're riding their bicycles. So, me and Pam decided to take Pam to work, and I'd go back, and I had Amanda with me. We'd go back and try to find them. And when we left Catfish Island, we went back by the Moore's house and just started going street to street in the neighborhood to see if we could find them.
You said you went back. Did you talk to Mr. and Mrs. Moore?
No, I don't think Don or Dana was home at the time. Don was, and we did talk to her. Other than asking whether it was Stevie or Mike here when we took Pam to work.
Okay.
And when I come back, I didn't see any change, bicycles in the front yard, so we just drove around street to street in the neighborhood to see if we could see them.
You and
Amanda.
Okay. How long did you do that?
Probably 30 minutes. And I went maybe an hour. I don't know about the time exactly, but after we went back to see if we could find them in the neighborhood, me and Amanda, I took Amanda to, when we both went home, and I said, come on, we'll go walk around the neighborhood and see if we can hear them behind them fences in somebody's yard, because I didn't know where George lived, which one of his old friends. But we was going to see if we could just hear them playing behind them fences, the privacy fences. So we did that for a while, and we didn't see them. We went back to our house.
If Dawn is correct and she actually saw Michael and Steve's bikes parked on Goodwin at 5:30, how did Terry never see the bikes? If it was earlier in the day, how did Terry and Pam not see them? Unfortunately, we don't have an answer because Terry wasn't specifically asked where he looked, not in 1993 and not in 2007. In 2007, Terry says that Dana and Don Moore came to his house looking for Michael.
And we hadn't been there very long, and Dana pulled up and asked if Michael was at our house. And I told her, I said, no, but they're supposed to be at your house. She said, well, I just left my house, and they're not, and I'm looking for them. I said, well, we've been looking for them.
Did Miss Moore say if the boys had ever been to her house that afternoon? Or?
I don't think she said that, but I told her, I said, they're supposed to be at your house, so we went by there on our way to work, take Pam to work, and then we come back by and see no bikes, and so we walked around, and then here we are, we're fixing to drive around some more, we was heading back to your house. She said, well, I'm heading to my house, I told her Dawn was there. I said, we'll follow you over there.
Now, who is Dawn?
Dawn is their daughter.
Their daughter. How old was she at the time? Best guess. 6 years old.
No, she was over Stevie. But she was 10, maybe 11.
Okay.
Just guessing.
What about Mr. Moore? Did you ever talk to him that afternoon or evening?
No. He's a truck driver or something.
Okay. Okay, so after you talk to Ms. Moore, she comes by your house and tells you that she's looking for them, looking for the boys too. At this time, do you know anything about Christopher Byers? So what do you do after you talk to Miss Moore?
She said she's going to her house. I said, well, I'm coming over there too. And we went over there, and Dawn was still there. And Dawn said she's going to go this way on the bicycle. So, while we're standing there in the front yard talking, here comes a big, bully-looking dude walking across the street. And I look at him, and I said, who's that? And, of course, it's Mark Byers. That's when I first met Mark Byers.
Okay.
And he looked like the Shaggy DA. No quote it. But he comes across the street, and he said, have y'all seen Chris? And we said, no, but have you seen Mike and Stevie? No. I think right then is when we put together that they might have been together.
This would seemingly be new information. However, during cross-examination by Paul Ford during the 1994 Eccles-Baldwin trial, Dana mentions going over to the Hobbs residence looking for Michael.
Had you been looking before that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Tell me where all you had looked.
All around in just that general area. And then over there by Pam Hobbs' house.
Dawn also recalls going over there with her mom.
I didn't get out of the car. I just remember seeing him and Dana standing at the door. Yeah, it was daylight when I saw him.
So the question is, what time did this happen?
And we hadn't been there very long, and Dana pulled up and asked if Michael was at our house. And I told her, I said, no, but they're supposed to be at your house. She said, well, I just left my house, and they're not, and I'm looking for them. I said, well, we've been looking for them.
Did Miss Moore say if the boys had ever been to her house that afternoon? Or
I don't think she said that, but you know, I told her, I said they're supposed to be at your house, so we went by there on our way to work, take them to work, and then we come back by and see no bikes, and so we walked around, and then here we are, we're fixing to drive around some more. We was heading back to your house. She said, well, I'm heading to my house. I told her Dawn was there. I said, we'll follow you over there.
who is Dawn?
Dawn is their daughter.
Their daughter. How old was she at the time? Best guess.
6.
6 years old.
No, she was older than Stevie. But she was 10, maybe 11.
Okay.
Just guessing.
What about Mr. Moore? Did you ever talk to him that afternoon or evening?
No. She was truck driving somewhere, working.
Okay. Okay, so after you talk to Ms. Moore, she comes by your house and tells you that she's looking for him, looking for the boys too. At this time, do you know anything about Christopher Byers?
No.
Okay. So what do you do after you talk to Ms. Moore?
She said she's going to her house. I said, well, I'm coming over there too. And we went over there, and Dawn was still there. And Dawn said she's going to go this way on the bicycle. So, you know, while we're standing there in the front yard talking, here comes a big, bully-looking dude walking across the street. And I look at him, and I said, who's that? And, of course, it's Mark Byers. That's when I first met Mark Byers.
Okay.
And he looked like the Shaggy DA. No quote it. But he comes across the street, and he said, have y'all seen Chris? And we said, no. But have you seen Mike and Stevie? No. I think right then is when we put together that they might have been together.
Mary didn't know that Chris was with Michael and Steve. Then it couldn't have been after 6 p.m. because at 6 p.m., Dana says she saw all 3 boys.
We got in the car, my wife, myself, and Ryan, and started driving around our neighborhood, which would like be down to Ingram, and then down Ingram and come back up Goodwin and cut through Wilson and McAuley, and just driving all around our neighborhood, around East High School, just driving all around that area right there looking for him. And then about 7:30, we looked for about an hour, and I had come up here to Broadway and kind of sitting by the Dollar General. It was kind of by the Dollar General store. There was a black police officer sitting there in his car, and I pulled up beside him and rolled my window down. I said, sir, we can't find my son. He's missing. He said, well, how long have you been looking for him? I said, about an hour or so. And he looked at his watch. He said, well, why don't you give it till around 8 o'clock? And he said, if you don't find him, call the police station and let them know what he was wearing and all, and they'll send an officer by and you give them a report, and then they'll put out over the mic what he's wearing, and the patrolman riding around will maybe see him. So I went back to we looked a little bit more around the neighborhood before we made it back home.
The sun was setting, the streetlights were on, and the boys still were not home. Mark, Melissa, and Ryan had been driving around the neighborhood looking for Chris. By 8 o'clock p.m., he did as the patrol officer suggested and called police. Officer Regina Meek was dispatched to the Byers' home to respond. When she arrived, Mark explained the situation. Chris Byers was reported missing at 8:10 p.m. As Officer Meek is walking out the door, Dana Moore is walking up to the Byers' house.
And then she did her mic, and put it out, I guess, over the air, what he was wearing and where he was last seen and all. Well, she says, I'm going to get out my car and I'll start riding and looking, and we'll be, looking in the neighborhood for your son. Well, as I start to let her out, Dana Moore is knocking on the door from across the street. She said, have y'all found Christopher? And we said, no, we're looking for him. And she said, well, he's with Michael and Stevie. Well, that's the first time that my wife and I knew that he was with anybody else. We figured he was just alone. So Dana then told me, she said, well, around 6:15, 6:20, she said, I was walking our dog around the block, and she said, I saw Michael riding his bike, Stevie was on his bike, and Christopher was on the back of the bike with Steve. And Dana said, just about halfway down the street here, looks like Christopher's skateboard. And sure enough, it was his skateboard. So then the police officer, if I'm not mistaken, asked Dana, how long you been looking for your little boy? And she told her, well, for the last hour and a half. And she said the Branch, Stevie Branch, which is, Mr. Hobbs, she said Terry, which is Stevie's daddy, has been looking for him since about 5 o'clock, 4:30, 5 o'clock. And she said, I saw Christopher with him at 6:30. So we're thinking, well, they're around the neighborhood here, all three of them together.
Oh, at 6:30, they were all together.
Dana told me at 6:30, told my wife and I and Regina Meeks that at 6:30 she saw.
Okay.
So we, felt like, well, they're all three together and all three of them being Cub Scouts. Maybe they're doing, we didn't really know at the time.
Officer Meek learns there are 3 missing boys. Dana reports Michael missing at 9:24 p.m.
At sometime around 8 o'clock, were you dispatched to 1400 East Barton?
Yes, sir, I was.
And what time did you arrive?
Around 8:10.
All right. And whose residence was 1400 East Barton?
Byers' residence.
And when you were at that residence, what did you find when you got there?
Okay. When I got there, I found a mother and father worried about their missing son, their 8-year-old son.
And while you were there, did you have contact with any other parents?
Yes, sir. Mrs. Moore came and knocked on the door while I was taking a report from Mr. and Mrs. Byers, and told me that her son was with the Byers boy, and also Steve Branch was with them. She had saw them earlier.
All right. And did you take a formal report from her at that time?
No, sir, I did not. I did finish the Byers report, and when I left there, I could not relocate her because she was still looking for her son, and I found her again around 9:24.
Okay. All right. Now, after taking the report, what efforts, if any, did you make to try to locate these children?
Okay. I had been advised by Mrs. Moore the last time anyone saw them, they were going toward a wooded area. Of course, it was nicknamed Robin Hood by the children. It was pointed out to me there was 2 entrances, and since they had told me that a couple of people had went into the entrance off of Goodwin, I went down to Macaulay.
You went to that area about what time was it?
It was turning dark. I didn't look at my watch to see what time it was, but it was well on its way to dark.
All right. And was there any particular thing about the conditions that you noted?
Yes, sir. When I went down the hill to the pipe, of course, the weeds were extremely high. Mosquitoes were tremendous. I was breathing in mosquitoes. It was so bad. And I decided at that time that 3 8-year-old boys would not be staying in the woods with mosquitoes that bad. And I turned around, went back to my vehicle, and decided to start checking buildings and other areas.
All right. And did you do that?
Yes, sir.
And how long did you continue to search?
I went back to the police department around 11:15 or 11:20.
And is that when you're...
that's when my part of it stopped, yes, sir.
When did your shift actually end?
11:15 is whenever the rest of the officers finished their shift.
While Officer Meek is searching for the boys, she's called away and dispatched to a local Bojangles chicken restaurant. The manager, Marty King, had called to report that an African-American male covered in mud and blood was in the women's restroom. The man was described as confused. He had left blood on the wall of the restroom as well as on the floor. Bojangles is about a mile from where the boys were found. Terry says he followed Dana back to her house, and this is when he meets Mark Byers for the first time.
We hadn't been there very long, and Dana pulled up and asked if Michael was at our house. And I told her, I said, no, but they're supposed to be at your house. She said, well, I just left my house, and they're not, and I'm looking for them. I said, well, we've been looking for them.
Did Miss Moore say if the boys had ever been to her house that afternoon? Or?
I don't think she said that, but, you know, I told her, I said, they're supposed to be at your house, so we went by there on our way to work, take them to work. And then we come back by and see no bikes, and so we walked around, and then here we are, we're fixing to drive around some more. We was heading back to your house. She said, well, I'm heading to my house. I told her Dawn was there. I said, we'll follow you over there.
Now, who is Dawn?
Dawn is their daughter.
Their daughter. How old was she at the time? Best guess. 6 years old?
No, she was older than Stevie. But she was 10, maybe 11.
Okay.
Just guessing.
What about Mr. Moore? Did you ever talk to him that afternoon or evening?
No. He was truck driving somewhere, working.
Okay. Okay, so after you talk to Ms. Moore, she comes by your house and tells you that she's looking for him, looking for the boys too. At this time, do you know anything about Christopher Byers?
No.
Okay. So what do you do after you talk to Ms. Moore?
She said she's going to her house. I said, well, I'm coming over there too. And we went over there, and Dawn was still there. And Dawn said she's seeing them go this way on the bicycle. So, you know, while we're standing there in the front yard talking, here comes a big, bully-looking dude walking across the street. And I look at him, and I said, who's that? And, of course, it's Mark Byers. That's when I first met Mark Byers.
Okay.
And he looked like the Shaggy DA. No quote to that. But he comes across the street, and he said, have y'all seen Chris? And we said, no. But have you seen Mike and Stevie? No. I think right then is when we put together that they might have been together.
However, Dawn recalls things differently.
We were coming from the branch house when we saw the police over there. Yeah, we had already been looking for a while. Yeah, I was with her until late that night. Yeah, we saw him at his house, and then I remember seeing him after he'd gone to pick up Pam. It was before we saw the police. I'm not exactly sure on that one because I think we went by several times.
So does Mark Byers.
I told Ryan and I said, let's start going door to door just down the street asking all the kids if they'd seen him. Well, we'd gone down the street a little ways, and there was this black girl and this little black boy that live on, like my house is right here on the corner. They live on this side of 14th, about halfway down. I don't remember their name right off. I could show you the house probably, and I know my son Ryan could show you the house because there's a little boy and girl that live there that Christopher would play with. And the little boy and little girl said, yeah, we saw Christopher and Stephen and Michael a little bit after 6:30. Our mama was bringing us home from the store, and we was coming down Goodwin, and we saw them going in the Robin Hood area. Within that concrete chute, you know, where the concrete part is, it goes in down there just right off of 14th. So Ryan and I then came back to the house, and Dana is around her house looking, and then Terry Hobbs, I think, had come up by then and told them, you know, that was the area they'd last seen. So we kind of all converged down there looking in the woods.
Did the lady say anything at all about seeing anyone else or
well, that lady, see, we didn't talk to the lady. It was just the kids. But the kids. Now, I'll get to later on Thursday. I'll get to that in a minute. We started looking. I looked in that area. It's now probably 8:30. It got dark.
If Terry had followed Dana back to her home when he says he did, he would have seen the patrol car in front of the Byers' home. Officer Meek would have seen him as well. At around 9 p.m., Terry arrives at Catfish Island to pick up Pam. Pam reports as she was walking out the door to the restaurant, Terry was walking in. He brushed past her and headed to the payphone. Pam continues walking to the car. Amanda is alone in the vehicle and tells her, "Mama, we can't find Bubba." Inside the restaurant, Terry is on the phone with police.
when I picked her up from work.
Okay, you remember about what time that was?
It's right at 9 o'clock.
Okay, and when you went to pick her up, who all was with you?
Amanda.
Just Amanda?
Okay, I had picked her up. Yeah, because I had her with me. Picked Pam.
When you met Pam at her job, what was the first thing y'all talked about?
Pam, like every other night, coming out of the building with 2 pieces of candy. One for me and one for Steve. She came out that night with 2 pieces of candy, and she asked, "Where's Stevie?" I said, "Pam, we haven't been able to find you yet." And she says, "He's dead." And I said, "Pam, don't say that, because who would think that?" I was getting nervous a little bit before I picked Pam up because it started getting dark. And when your kids is out there after dark, well, as a parent, you get them things. The first thing Pam said was, "He's dead." And I said, "Don't say that. He is." I said, "What makes you say that?" I don't know why she said that, but she said that.
You know who was the first family or the first ones to call the police on this?
I know when we was at the Daniel's house when I first met Mark, we said right then we was going to call the police. But I thought I called them before that. And I can't remember, but it seemed like I did. But I ain't going to sit here and say that. I'm just trying to think back.
Did you have a home phone at that time? Would you call from your home or?
No, payphone.
Payphone?
Yeah.
Did you have a working home phone at that time? Sure. Did you? Okay.
I might have even called from there because I don't remember that. But I remember when I was at the Moore's house and I met Mark, I remember telling Dan, because they both said this one called the police, and I told one of us, said, tell them Stevie ain't here too. So I think I didn't call, I didn't make that call right then, but I mentioned that to Dan.
Officers Moore and Meek respond to Catfish Island, and Steve Branch is reported missing at 9:25 p.m. The area where the search took place looks very different today than it did in May 1993. The woods have been cut down on both sides of the pipe bridge. There are 3 ways to access the area where the boys were found. The first is from the Blue Beacon truck wash. The woods are behind the entrance past the parking lot. From there, you go down a steep embankment. From the neighborhood, there are 2 entrances. One is at the dead end of W.E. Cat, the other is at the dead end of Goodwin. From both entrances, there's hills and bike trails. To reach what would later be the discovery site, you cross what's been called the pipe bridge, which is a pipe that has wooden planks on both sides. From looking through the case file at what was available during the original investigation, the search was primarily contained to the woods on the neighborhood side.
I never did concentrate much down that way where they were found. I mainly stayed in this area here, and the only reason I stayed in that area was the few times that my older son Ryan had gone down there to ride his bike. That's where, he told me he had rode. And the few times that Christopher had told me that he had been down there, that was the area that he had been in. I had heard him talk about some pipe that you could cross the bayou with, but I had never seen it. And that night, I really never did see the pipe real good until the next morning.
Let me ask you a question. While y'all were out searching during this period of time after it had gotten dark, we had several reports of gunshot being fired. Was somebody down there with a gun, maybe shooting up in the air, hollering
I've
for the
never
kids?
heard a gunshot fired.
We got some reports of that. It may have been backfiring off vehicles out there on the expressway.
I never heard a gunshot. There by the house, when we were standing around the house, my wife said something about, "Did you hear that gunshot?" This was like 12 or 1 o'clock. I said, "No, honey, that was just a car right down there on Wilson that backfired." But while we were in the woods, I never heard a gunshot. Now, my older son, Ryan, when we came in that night, told me, and of course, I don't know where all he was running around out there looking with Brett and Richie, but he told me, he said, "Dad, I thought that I heard a rock or something hit the water. He said, I thought I heard something splash in the water. And he said, it kind of sounded loud. I said, well, where were you? He said, well, I was, in them trails that go along the bayou. And I really don't know exactly where he was.
Ryan was interviewed by the West Memphis Police Department on May 12, 1993, about where he searched. States he got home at exactly 3:38 p.m. Chris was not at home. Ryan had to be in court at 4 p.m. His dad took him. Dad dropped him off at court and told Ryan he was going to go pick his mom up from work and go look for Chris. Dad picked him up from court around 5:36 p.m., closer to 6 p.m. Dad told him that Chris had broken a seal on the window to get into the house, told him that Chris would be grounded for a week, and that he had left Chris at the house with his mom. When they got home, they were supposed to go to Shoney's to eat. Mom was on the phone long distance, said she had heard Chris go upstairs. Ryan went upstairs to look for him, went outside and checked down 14th. Wilson states he, his mom, and dad went up to Big Star, told a police officer that Chris was missing, told them to call the station to report it. Next door neighbor said she saw Chris on a skateboard and Steve Branch and Michael Moore came up on their bikes. He left the skateboard in the street and got on the bike with Steve. States that he had not seen Chris with Steve before. Ryan found a skateboard about 6 houses from his on the side of the street. States that he went to the woods with Brett Smith, EQHS, at about 9 p.m. Richie Masters and Robbie were there with them. Went in from the Goodwin dead end, went at the end to the bayou by the swing. Heard what sounded like 5 real loud splashes in the water. States that he heard the grass and brush crackling. After the first 2 splashes, Ryan yelled, "Hello? Is anyone over there?" After the 3rd splash, Britt and Ryan got scared and ran back to the dead end. States that he and Britt ran down W.E. Cat until they got to the dead end of Macaulay, ran to the end towards the pipe, found Richie and Robbie, and told them what they had seen. When they got to the pipe, they heard a gunshot. Richie and Robbie went across the pipe to check things out. They were gone about 10 minutes. They came back. All 4 boys crossed the pipe and started looking in the woods, walked down into the chute and crossed on a tree towards the open field. Thinks that they were in the woods on the north side of the pipe for about 30 minutes. Saw the brown jacket, but knew it had been there for some time. When they came back out, Britt's mother was waiting on them. They went back to Ryan's house to see if Chris had come home. They left again and just drove around and looked in a couple of empty houses. Came home at midnight and Dad made him go to bed. Knows of at least 13 people were out searching. His friends who were with him that night were interviewed the next day. Terry Hobbs wasn't the only person to be interviewed for the first time by the West Memphis Police Department in 2007. David Jacoby was interviewed by telephone on June 21st. However, 2007 is not the first time the West Memphis Police Department had heard that Terry had a friend helping him search. Back in 1993, Mark Byers mentions a friend of Terry's in his interview on May 19th.
Then we went back, and about the time I got back to my house, that's when I met Terry's, it would have been Stevie Branch's grandfather. Pulled up in Dana Moore's yard in his truck, and he walked over. We were kind of like all standing out under the street light. Then it was me and my wife, Dana Moore. Todd was still at work, and then Terry Hobbs, a friend of his with a beard that lived, I think he said, on 17th Street.
For whatever reason, he simply wasn't interviewed in 1993. David and his wife Bobby were friends with Pam. Bobby and Pam were both from Blytheville, Arkansas. Terry and David became friends when Terry and Pam began dating. In 1993, David and Bobby Jacoby also lived near Terry and Pam on 17th Street in West Memphis. On May 5th, Pam and Amanda had been visiting Bobby Jacoby. Pam left from the Jacoby house to go to the store to get cigarettes and then walked to Weaver to pick up Stevie. The Jacobys have 2 children, a daughter who was 5 at the time and a son who was a year old. The Hobbs and the Jacobys got together pretty frequently in 1993. David says it was at least 2 times a week. David also worked at Memphis Ice Cream, with Terry, where they both delivered ice cream to stores in the area. The Jacobys moved back to Blytheville in 1996. David also tells Detective Mitchell that he and Terry haven't kept in contact much since Stevie's funeral. He says they've talked on the telephone 4 or 5 times, but he's not seen Terry in 3 or 4 years. David also says his wife Bobby said Terry would drop by on occasion. The same detective who interviewed Hobbs and Jacoby interviewed Pam. Pam was interviewed by Detective Mitchell on June 19, 2007. Detective Mitchell was tasked with the interviews by prosecutor Brent Davis. Davis, along with John Fogelman, represented the state during the original trials in 1994. In 2007, the results of the DNA test came back from Bodie, the lab that was chosen to perform the testing. The whole reason for these interviews being conducted was because they weren't done in 1993. Well, not like this anyway. The detectives working the case in 1993 did speak to Pam and Terry a couple of times, but not about where they searched. Terry is interviewed a couple of days later on June 21, 2007 at 9 a.m. After speaking with Terry, Detective Mitchell calls David Jacoby at 7:15 p.m. David says Terry came by on May 5th at around 5:30, 6 p.m. with Amanda to play guitars. At some point, David asks Terry where Steve is. Terry tells David he's out riding his new bike that his grandfather gave him. Jacoby also says that Steve was supposed to be home before dark. He also says that Terry told him that he told Steve to be home before dark. He says they played guitar for at least an hour, at which point Terry leaves Jacoby's to go over to his house to see if Steve is there. However, when asked if Terry left Amanda there or took her with him, he thinks she went with Terry but cannot be certain of that. The earliest Terry would have left would have been at 6:30 and at the latest 7:30 p.m.
There was a lot of people out there going through the woods.
Do you remember, if you could, tell me as many people as you can remember by name?
David.
Jacoby?
Mm-hmm. I didn't know anybody else.
Did Pam go into the woods?
Not until I picked her up.
And
we went in together.
Did you go into the woods before you picked up Pam?
Sure.
You did. Remember about what time that was?
6:30.
Okay, who was with you at that time?
David.
David Jacoby? Anybody else?
Just a lot of neighborhood people. Because there was people on 3-wheelers, 4-wheelers, motorcycles, bicycles, on foot. That was, calling herself, helping us look for 3 kids.
This interview would become part of the discovery when Terry sued Natalie Maines, and that note of 7:45 comes from that. Terry says that after he dropped Pam off at work, he immediately began looking for Steve. Terry Hobbs has never said he played guitars with David Jacoby that day. When he sued Natalie Maines in 2009, he was asked under oath in a deposition to walk through that day. He's asked specifically about playing Guitar Hero with Jacoby.
How long were you at Mr. Jacoby's?
Long enough to drop my daughter off and see if he'd go help me.
Okay, and did he go help you?
He went around with me and we rode around looking. He sure did. All the way up till early in the morning.
Well, let's back up. So what time, do you recall what time you left Amanda in Mr. Jacoby's house?
No, I don't.
Do you recall how, and you and Mr. Jacoby drove around in a car looking?
We did.
Your car or his car?
Probably mine.
What kind of car were you driving?
I don't remember.
Where'd you drive around?
The whole city of West Memphis.
Just in your neighborhood or just all over?
The whole city of West Memphis.
Okay. You playing Guitar Hero while you were at Mr. Jacoby's?
I don't recall. I don't remember that.
You don't remember playing Guitar Hero at Mr. Jacoby's for a while?
Not that day. I don't remember.
You used to play Guitar Hero a lot at his house, right?
No, never.
Never played Guitar Hero at his house?
Play guitars at his house.
Okay, guitars.
But sorry. Not the game.
All right, I apologize. Do you recall playing guitars at his house that night?
No.
You don't recall or you didn't?
I don't recall.
At the end of Hobbs' book, Box Full of Nightmares, is a section of questions posed to him on social media. Hobbs agreed to answer them. Question: why did you not call Pam at work and let her know yourself and David were going out searching? And if you knew Stevie was missing, why spend an hour playing guitars at Mr. Jacoby's house? Answer: at that point, nothing was wrong. I went by David's house and asked him what he was doing. He said he wasn't doing anything, so I told him I was riding around looking for Stevie, so he rode along. I didn't call Pam because there wasn't anything wrong yet. Again, she already knew he wasn't home when we took her to work. Pam was also confused and angry that Terry didn't let her know he never found Steve until picking her up from work at 9 p.m. Pam's anger and resentment only grew when she learned Steve was murdered. Obviously, there are two possibilities about the guitar story. David Jacoby is wrong, and it wasn't May 5th, or he's right, and Terry Hobbs is either mistaken or lying. Either way, all of this could have been answered if Terry Hobbs had been formally interviewed in 1993 like Mark Byers. Instead, inconsistencies have been dismissed and chalked up to memories fading with the passage of time. The search by the family and friends ended that night around 2 or 3 in the morning. The West Memphis patrol officer said they would keep an eye out for the boys though, but that was of little comfort to the boys' parents. Mark Byers, Terry and Pam Hobbs, and Dana Moore reluctantly returned to their homes, clinging to the hope that their boys would be found. None of them slept that night. Sadly, it was just the first night of many sleepless nights to come.
Green went on the left side there, red went on the right side.
Don't let nobody come up here. Don't nobody in here.